Regarding this line of work, what made you want to go into it, and what did you want to get out of it?
Okay. I think, so I've been in it a long time, and partly I think I've kind of moved into it through circumstance, so just things that have happened. Where I started off was, and I'll be honest with you, and I probably started off in a position that a lot of people going into university start off with, is like I just wanted to save the whole world, you know, all of it on my own. You know, and I kind of changed over time from I want to save the world to, you know, I want to save the country, I want to save the community, and it's narrowed down. Now it's kind of like I just want to make sure everyone gets through the day okay. That's kind of where I came from. So my passion was community. Was you know, I grew up on an estate, an inner city estate, and I was quite political, and I wanted to I kind of wanted to represent community, stand up for communities that I felt, you know, weren't being listened to, and that was broader than young people actually at the time. It was quite specifically a political agenda on my part. But then coming out of university doing reasonably well, and I kind of looked, you know, I actually looked at media at the time, which you know, was just starting to become sort of available to communities. That was what I was really interested in, was how you could use media to speak up. That's not gone the way I thought it was going to go. But so, and I straight away came out saying, no, I want to work in communities. And I ended up getting a really great position in a youth club as a sort of a research post for a PhD. I was working in a youth club. And it went from there. I've just worked with young people for 20 years since then, and I've been through different phases. So I've managed, directed an arts centre. I've managed different kinds of projects. I've worked in schools doing working with staff around creative curriculum, and it kind of came out of that, developed from there really. I ended up managing education projects with this sort of hat of different kind of curricula, you know, pushing back on the growth and rise and dominance of Ofsted and that kind of factory farming of young people, which is where I sort of see it. And it developed kind of organically into this really, and along the way, having worked lots and lots of my work in inner cities, where you kind of see poverty and you know, related issues around trauma, damaged families, those kinds of things, is kind of that's how I've ended up doing this. And I always believed, really from when I started, that you could do things differently. I don't necessarily think I can change the world now, but you know, I can change somebody's world a little bit. That's why I did it.
With knife crime and that level of violence, being like increasing in this country,
Yeah.
do you do any programs or showing of awareness?
We do to some extent. I think it's slightly different for us because we're not your kind of the average sort of pupil referral unit. So our learners are not necessarily the kind of higher profile in that sense. They're at risk of that, and they have perceptions around that and around personal safety and risks around personal safety. But ours are very different, and it's a different kind of end of the spectrum. For ours, they're affected in other ways. They're out of mainstream for different reasons, not necessarily antisocial behaviour. And one of the reasons why we're doing this is because they can't cope with mainstream, and they end up getting funneled into other kinds of pupil referral units where young people are affected much more by gang influence, you know, kind of in the same setting, and it's really, really difficult for those, as you can imagine. So there needed to be a place where our kind of learners can thrive and don't have to manage being cheek by jowl with gang-based young people or gang-influenced young people, violence-influenced young people. So it's slightly different for us in the sense that we're working at a kind of a lower level of that. There are aspirations in some of our young people around wanting to be in gangs or admiring gangs and gang violence and stuff like that. So we do work around that. I think our biggest work around antisocial behaviour is social networking, actually, or antisocial networking as it ought to be called, really. So we do a lot of education work around that because that's where ours are at the most vulnerable, really, rather than knife crime. So I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but if there's anything you'd want to pick up on that at all, do you think that's, is that it, do you reckon? Does it answer your question?
I think for your dissertation you might have to be quite specific about what groups of young people knife crime is an issue for, and whether the media conflates that to all young people.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I mean, I do think, and this is where you kind of where it broadens out is that media perception, and then you get our young people perhaps feeling like they have to be armed for self-protection. We don't tend to see it. We do education programs around it, and we can call people in when we need to. Potentially, I mean, we've got a metal detector here. We can scan people on their way in if we want to. The only real incident we've had in 2 years of that in terms of weaponry is somebody brought in a kind of a display knife and actually showed it to the staff because they were like, you know, they didn't realise. You know, I mean, this is the kind of the guys we're working with. It was like, look what I've got, you know, and it's like, sorry, call the police and get this.
It was an artefact, not a weapon.
Yeah, exactly.